You should hear what keeps him up at night.
This is what keeps me up at night. I don't understand how my fellow Americans, I don't even understand how this election is close. And yes, I'm voting for you, but I would also vote for that wall over there.
Well, he's half right. We do need a wall. You know, to keep out gang members, fentanyl dealers, human traffickers, and Anna Navarro. What's funny, though, is that Stern actually thought that was a compliment. Stern has become such a wussified sycophant, he doesn't realize that telling Kamala that he'd vote for a wall is telling her that he knows she's as dumb as one. On his radio show, Howard Stern defended wokeism, saying it's a compliment when someone calls him woke. Listen.
If woke means I can't get behind Trump, which is what I think it means, or that I support people who want to be transgender, or I'm for the vaccine, dude, call me woke as you want. I'm not for stupidity, but I am woke, motherfucker, and I love it.
Oh dear, he swore. He swore that'll win over the woke.
Greg didn't stop at the surface. He peeled back the layers of content like a critic with a scalpel. What he found wasn't pretty. Howard Stern, once the fire-breathing iconoclast of shock radio, has morphed into something startlingly tame. The guy who once made morning commutes feel like a wild ride through taboo territory now feels more like background noise at a spa. Gutfeld painted the transformation with biting flair. Watching Stern today, he said, is like watching a lion swap the savannah for a silk cushion. Once fearless, now domesticated. Neutered, declawed, and far too busy massaging the egos of A-list celebs to remember how to growl, let alone bite. Where interviews once left publicists sweating bullets and guests squirming in their seats, Stern now dishes out warm, fuzzy chats that feel more like late-night infomercials. He used to grill guests with a flamethrower. Now he's lighting aromatherapy candles and asking about their favorite vacation spots. Gutfeld couldn't help but mock it. If Stern gets any snugglier with his guests, the FCC is going to slap a PG rating on the show for excessive coziness. But Greg wasn't done. He went after the glaring contradiction. The man who built his legacy by skewering political correctness is now its most obedient disciple. Stern, he argued, has become the ringleader of the moral mea culpa circus. Gutfeld dubbed it performance penance, an endless on-air campaign to rewrite his own history. At this rate, Greg quipped, if Stern drops one more tearful apology for a joke from 1998, the Library of Congress might have to build an entire wing just to house his public remorse.
Stern being holed up in his house that long, it explains a lot of things, like how you forget how other people live, especially in hard times like a pandemic. For the longest time, 2 years in fact, the same time Stern's been AWOL, I wondered where he went. Not physically, but mentally. I bet you did too. Remember his screeds about COVID? They were epic and angry.
But it wasn't just the content that shifted. Greg zeroed in on the posture, the whole vibe. Stern doesn't just sound different now. He carries himself like a man who's transcended the very world he once dominated. Gutfeld mocked it with surgical precision, saying Stern now floats through interviews with the smug air of someone who thinks he's finally evolved, when in reality it reeks not of wisdom, but of a carefully curated insecurity. This isn't personal growth, Greg argued. It's strategic retreat. The second things got hot, Stern didn't double down. He shrank back, doused the fire, and now walks around acting like he never held the torch in the first place. And then there's the obsession with approval. The guy who once declared, loud and proud, that he didn't give a damn what anyone thought, now seems desperate to be invited to all the right tables, photographed at all the right parties, embraced by all the right institutions. The same ones that used to blacklist him. Gutfeld painted the image with brutal clarity. A once untouchable icon, now politely knocking on the doors of elite circles that once tried to erase him. Even Stern's remaining fans didn't escape Greg's aim. He joked that today's Howard faithful resemble a nostalgic support group, people quietly grieving the loss of the old rebel, but too afraid to say it, just in case he's the one who cancels them now. Listening to Stern today, Greg said, is like watching your favorite punk band ditch their leather for organic cotton and start composing jingles for oat milk brand.
Stern used to throw bologna slices at strippers' butts. With accuracy, I might add. Now he's worried the possible leader of the free world can't handle his verbal foot rub. I wonder if he used to get this nervous for the strippers before he'd spank them on their bare asses with a dead fish.
If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell so you never miss a moment. Now, back to Greg, who wasn't pulling any punches. He launched into Stern's political pivot with the precision of a surgeon and the fury of a betrayed fan. The man who once thrived in chaos, roasting everyone without mercy, now parades around like the sanctimonious hall monitor of outrage culture. According to Gutfeld, Stern didn't just take a political stance. He practically outsourced his entire worldview to Twitter trends and MSNBC talking points, then packaged it with enough self-righteousness to make a TDD talk blush. The sting, Greg argued, lies in the irony. This is the same guy who made a career out of gleefully crossing lines, now wagging his finger at anyone who dares to toe them. It's like watching a retired bank robber become a mall cop, lecturing teens about shoplifting while clutching his old ski mask, Greg quipped. But the real kicker? Stern didn't just sell out, he bought in. Hook, line, and Hollywood handshake. The rebellion's gone, replaced with the soft drone of someone who sounds less like a provocateur and more like an HR rep reading from a diversity training manual. Then Greg tore into Stern's Hollywood fixation. The name-dropping, the fawning, the desperate climb for relevance in circles he once torched with glee. He doesn't want to host the Oscars, Greg laughed. He wants to be invited just for breathing the same air. Watching Stern now, he said, is like seeing a former USC brawler twirl into a ballet recital. Technically graceful, maybe, but mostly, it's just weird.
Wokeism is a contagion. Stern got it from Jimmy Kimmel, his new best friend, and Kimmel got it from his wife, and his wife got it from where you get all infections, a toilet seat. Kat, I find that his definition of wokeism is very simplistic. I mean, it's like, it's not about COVID.
Greg didn't stop at calling out the transformation. He went for the foundation. He asked the question many longtime fans were too afraid to confront. Did Stern ever actually stand for anything real? Or was the whole thing just a masterclass in performance? Maybe he wasn't the fearless truth-teller he claimed to be. Maybe he was just the best in the game at reading the room. Back then, shock was currency, and Stern knew exactly how to spend it. But times change, and now it seems he's reading a very different room and playing a very different part. This time, he's not the outlaw, he's the enlightened elder. The reformed provocateur who scolds the rebellion he once led like an embarrassed parent cleaning up after a wild youth. And here's where Greg landed the real punch. Stern's not evolving. He's erasing, whitewashing the past with layers of virtue signaling and carefully worded regret, as if his entire legacy was just a messy teenage phase. But it wasn't a phase, it was who he was. And now he's trying to bury it beneath a mountain of progressive platitudes like he's prepping his resume for sainthood. Gutfeld didn't mince words. He called it what it is, cowardice wearing a mask of wisdom. Stern didn't own his legacy. He ran from it. He didn't face the music. He left the venue entirely, then came back as a critic of the playlist. And the saddest part, it wasn't shocking, it was inevitable. Because when rebels stop rebelling, they don't just fade, they conform. They blend, they become safe.
Stop putting up with the idiots in this country and just say it's mandatory to get vaccinated. F them, f their freedom. I want my freedom to live.
Man, this guy makes Anthony Fauci sound like a Canadian trucker. But, maybe you should follow his next vaccine with a shot of Valium. But it's weird. He went from ridiculing the man to becoming him. No longer embracing rebellion, he French kisses regulation. He went from mocking a radio executive who was a rigid by-the-book a-hole that he named Pig Vomit to being Pig Vomit himself. He went from how...
Greg leaned back with a grin, not the kind you wear after a cheap jab, but the satisfied smirk of someone who just peeled back the curtain and exposed the machinery behind the myth. This wasn't just a roast, it was a reveal. A spotlight on a man so entangled in preserving his legacy, he'd forgotten how to live it. Stern, once the renegade at the front of the charge, now looked more like the event planner, clipboard in hand, checking off names on the celebrity guest list he used to mock. And the mic? Still hot, because Gutfeld wasn't done, not even close. With the audience still catching its breath, he rolled up his sleeves and went for the gut. Beneath the glitz and behind the gilded interviews, Howard Stern hadn't just faded, he'd calcified into something worse, predictable. And for a man who once made his mark by blindsiding everyone in the room, Predictability is the ultimate betrayal. Greg zoomed in. He said Stern used to be electric, unfiltered, unhinged, a human curveball you could never see coming. Now, you don't even need to tune in to know what you'll get. Same takes, same tone, same soft applause for whatever is trending on cable news. Every segment is shrink-wrapped in the same sanitized message: be better, do better, broadcast from a soundproof luxury bunker stuffed with pillows of moral superiority and lined with the plush fabric of Hollywood approval. Gutfeld summed it up. At this point, you could sync Stern's opinions with your smartwatch and still be 3 minutes early. And then came the gut punch, Stern's newfound obsession with fear. Greg tore into it with surgical precision, exposing how the once chaotic king of controversy had turned into a man allergic to discomfort. The same Howard who once fed off chaos now flinches at the slightest inconvenience, germs, confrontation, even the whiff of an opposing opinion. It's all off limits now. Gutfeld dubbed it the fortress of fragility, a soundproof, sanitized bubble where no harsh truth can penetrate and criticism gets bounced off the padded walls like a bad echo. Stern, the guy who once laughed in the face of backlash, now seems ready to call security if someone speaks above a whisper. Greg didn't stop at the behavior, he dove into the psychology. What made Stern magnetic back in the day was his willingness to poke the bear, rattle the cage, and take whatever came his way. Now, he's flinching before the door even creaks open. No bear poking here. Just kitten petting in a designer bathrobe, sipping chamomile tea with trembling hands, all while convincing himself, and maybe a shrinking audience, that this is what bravery looks like now.
Incredibly brave to take this stance after you've made $300-400 million not being woke, right? Loving Donald Trump, exploiting the mentally ill, wearing blackface. Look at the crop of woke comics, whether it's Stern or Jimmy Kimmel, his BFF, Sarah Silverman, Joy Behar, Michael Ian Black. What do they all have in common? They wore blackface. And then they went woke. It's not a chicken or egg thing there. You know what order it came. So I call this BFR. It's blackface reparations. There's nothing in Stern's previous career that could withstand this modern witch.
The rebel who once spat in the face of conformity now clings to it like a toddler wrapped in a security blanket. Stern, the man who built a career by pushing buttons and crossing lines, has become a polished reflection of the very system he once dismantled for sport. Greg turned the spotlight to the legacy Stern seems so desperate to preserve. This carefully curated version of himself where every jagged edge is sanded down, every controversy rebranded as youthful misjudgment, and the wild past repackaged as a prelude to his evolved self. But evolution doesn't require amnesia. Gutfeld chuckled. A real legacy isn't about rewriting your past, it's about owning it. And right now, Stern isn't writing a bold new chapter. He's redacting the old ones, covering them in whiteout, and pretending the ink was never there. Greg likened it to a rock star who once lit the stage on fire, literally, only to return decades later with an acoustic guitar and a lecture about recycling. Sure, a few polite claps still echo in the room, but everyone quietly misses the rage, the risk, the raw honesty. That was the connection. That was the power. Stern's fatal flaw wasn't that he changed. It's that he's pretending he didn't. And just when it seemed Greg might let up, he twisted the knife. Stern's not the king of media anymore. He's the court jester for the cultural elite. Still in costume, still playing the part, but now dancing for applause instead of drawing blood. And the most tragic part, he doesn't even seem to realize the difference. Gutfeld's takedown wasn't just brutal, it was surgical. With each line, he stripped away the illusion, revealing the polished puppet beneath the persona. The edge, the chaos, the danger that once defined Howard Stern? Greg didn't just claim it's gone. He buried it 6 feet deep, wrapped in a cashmere hoodie, and broadcast from a multi-million-dollar echo chamber.
Isn't the story? It's what Howard said later on his radio show. Quote, I really had an exhausting weekend. Emotionally, physically. For the first time in 2 years, I ventured out of the house. Now, maybe he's exaggerating. We all do that. In fact, the more successful you get in media, the more exhausting, the easier.
Greg Gutfeld didn't just wander into this one. He stormed the gates like a man on a mission, grinning like he just discovered his favorite target had gift-wrapped his own downfall. That target? None other than Howard Stern, the once fearsome king of all media who's gone from flipping off the establishment to flipping cue cards scripted by publicists. Gutfeld wasn't coming in with half jabs or polite critique. He showed up locked, loaded, and gleefully unfiltered. No metaphors were spared. No punches were pulled. This was less a commentary and more a full-on dismantling, delivered with the precision of a sniper and the energy of a guy who lives for this kind of
About face. It's not unlike Howard Stern. I mean, talk about a transition. On Tuesday, he conducted an interview with Kamala Harris that was so simpering and feminine, I got my period while listening to it.
Greg opened fire by torching what he called the full-blown personality transplant of Howard Stern. Once the snarling outlaw of the airwaves, a human Molotov cocktail who thrived on shock, chaos, and truth bombs, now reduced to the carefully polished mascot of the very culture he once torched. Gutfeld didn't hold back, painting Stern as a man who once roared into microphones, now whispering on morning talk shows while cradling a mug of almond milk. The rebel is gone, replaced by someone who speaks in affirmations and sounds like he's auditioning to narrate meditation apps between stops on a humility-themed book tour.
But that's how Stern can call snacking with celebs at a fancy restaurant exhausting. Exhausting. Like he finished the overnight shift in a coal mine, or hearing Kat talk about her pets.
Fair.
But I get it, life is tough, especially when you've been cut off from the world for 2 years and a $20 million.
Gutfeld couldn't help but laugh at the irony. Howard Stern, the man who built an empire by mocking phonies, had somehow become the biggest phony of them all. The same guy who once turned shock jockery into an Olympic event now tiptoes through interviews like he's afraid to offend the office plant, let alone the HR department. Greg called it the greatest media plot twist of our time, not because Stern matured, but because he sold out with such theatrical gusto, he made late-night infomercial hosts look like monks. The rebellion didn't die. It was rebranded, laminated, and softly whispered into irrelevance.
Like wondering how she doesn't nap.
When you said you don't nap, I get it, because like what you've taken on is extraordinarily difficult. And I mean, do you feel the pressure of the moment in the sense that, like when I met you out in the hall, I said, I'm really nervous because I want this to go well for you. I want it to go well for the country.
Hold on. I need a minute.
Then Greg went in for the irony, the kind so thick you could cut it with a mic stand. The same media machine Stern once torched with glee. The pearl-clutching elites, the virtue-signaling pundits, the air-kissed cocktail crowd on both coasts. He now serves with the precision of a sommelier pouring vintage soft takes. Gutfeld marveled at the transformation. The man who built his brand by skewering celebrity fakeness somehow ended up marrying into it and morphing into a caricature of the very phoniness he once swore to annihilate. Stern didn't just join the club, he's polishing the silverware at the table.